Loneliness is a quiet giant. It doesn't roar. It whispers. It doesn't break down the door. It waits in the corners of your heart, hoping you'll believe the lie that you are forgotten, abandoned, and unseen. But today I want to remind you that the God who formed you, the God who knows the number of hairs on your head, the God who wrote your story before you ever lived a day of it, He sees you, and He never leaves His own alone. Maybe you're sitting here today and you've been surrounded by people but still feel overwhelmingly isolated. You smile on the outside, but inside you feel the heaviness of being misunderstood, ignored, or overlooked. Loneliness can make even the strongest hearts tremble. It can make mighty men feel small and brave women feel invisible. But I want you to hear me clearly. Your loneliness is not a sign of God's absence. It is an opportunity for His presence. Throughout Scripture, some of the greatest heroes faced the giant of loneliness. David cried in caves. Elijah sat under a tree and begged God to take his life. Paul wrote letters from lonely prisons. Even Jesus, in His most painful moment, said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Loneliness is not a sign of weakness. It is a human experience that God steps into with power. And here's why you must stay with me for this message. Because if you have ever felt alone, rejected, distant, forgotten, or isolated, this truth can change everything. You may feel alone, but you are never abandoned. You may feel unseen, but you are deeply known. You may feel isolated, but you are surrounded by the God who goes before you, stands beside you, and guards behind you. What you hear today has the power to break the chains that have held your heart captive for years. God sees you in your loneliness even when the people closest to you don't. When Hagar ran into the desert, broken and alone, she cried out, and God met her. He revealed Himself with a name He had never used before, El Roi, the God who sees me. He didn't see her because she was strong. He saw her because she was His, and He sees you for the very same reason. Loneliness grows loudest in silence, but God speaks in silence. The enemy wants to fill your empty moments with lies. No one cares. No one notices. No one understands. But God steps into that same silence and whispers, I am with you always. If you listen closely, you will hear His voice louder than the accusations of your loneliness. Let me tell you this, God walks into every room before you do. He is already in your tomorrow. He stands in the place you're afraid to go. He is preparing the people, the answers, the opportunities, and the breakthroughs you haven't seen yet. When you walk into a space that feels empty, it is only empty of people, never empty of God. Loneliness breaks when you step into God's purpose. You weren't created to drift through life unseen. You were created to carry God's light. People who know their calling never walk alone because God always accompanies His assignments. And finally, God uses loneliness to shape you, strengthen you, and send you. Every lonely season is a classroom, not a prison. God forges warriors in the quiet places. He builds spiritual muscle in the moments no one else sees. So today, lift your head. The giant of loneliness is big, but your God is bigger. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are not walking alone, not today, not ever. When I say that God sees you in your loneliness, even when others don't, I'm not speaking theoretically. I'm speaking from the deep well of Scripture and the undeniable pattern of God's dealings with His people. There are moments in life when you can be surrounded by crowds, surrounded by commitments, surrounded by noises, and still feel like the only person in the room. Loneliness isn't always the absence of people. Sometimes it's the absence of connection, of understanding, of someone who truly knows your heart. And when those moments hit, they hit hard. They make you wonder if anyone notices, if anyone cares, if anyone even sees the heaviness you carry quietly behind your smile. But listen to me, God sees you. He sees the prayers you pray when no one else is listening. He sees the tears you wipe away before anyone else can notice. He sees the weight you've been carrying so long you've stopped telling people about it because you're tired of explaining what they never seem to understand. God sees the loneliness that sits in your chest like a stone, and He doesn't turn away from it. He steps into it. I think about Hagar wandering through the desert, abandoned, betrayed, and pregnant with a future she didn't choose. No one cared where she was. No one was coming to look for her, but heaven was. And the moment God met her, she didn't just receive comfort, she received a revelation. She said, "You are the God who sees me." Imagine that. A woman who had been used, dismissed, and discarded becomes the first person in Scripture to give God a name based on personal experience. Why? Because loneliness has a way of revealing what crowds often hide: the intimate, unshakable attention of God. Some of you know exactly what that feels like. You've walked through seasons where the phone stopped ringing. The people who once promised to stand with you quietly drifted away. The support you thought you had wasn't there when you needed it most. And in those moments, it felt as if the world forgot you. But heaven didn't. God didn't. He has never once looked away from you. In your darkest nights, He saw you. In your most silent battles, He saw you. In the rooms where no one noticed your pain, He noticed every detail. You may think your loneliness is invisible because the world keeps moving as if nothing is wrong, but God's attention is not dependent on human awareness. He saw Elijah under the juniper tree. He saw David in the caves. He saw Joseph in the prison. And He sees you in your house, in your car, in your workplace, in that quiet moment before you fall asleep wondering if life will ever feel different. And here's the truth you must hold on to: God doesn't just see your loneliness, He sees through it. He sees the purpose beyond it, the strength developing within it, the faith being refined by it. What others overlook, God leans in to study. What others forget, God remembers. What others ignore, God embraces. There is no moment in your life where His eyes are not on you with love, intention, and presence. So when loneliness tries to convince you that you're unnoticed, speak back to it with confidence: "My God sees me." When the silence grows heavy, declare it. When the room feels empty, believe it. When your heart feels abandoned, remember it, because the God who saw Hagar in the desert sees you just as clearly today. Loneliness has a way of becoming loud, louder than the people around you, louder than the responsibilities on your shoulders, louder than the truth you once held close. And yet, strangely, its loudest moments arrive in the quiet. It is in the stillness, in the pauses of life. In the middle of the night, when everyone else is asleep, that loneliness starts speaking with a voice you cannot ignore. But here's what I want you to understand: while loneliness grows loudest in silence, that same silence is the very place where God speaks the clearest. There are seasons when life slows down, and suddenly the noise that once kept you distracted fades away. The music stops. The conversation dies out. The business loses its grip. And in that quiet place, the enemy loves to whisper lies, sharp, discouraging, persistent lies. You're alone. No one cares. No one understands. Nothing will change. And because everything around you is still, those lies can echo until they feel like truth. But hear me, silence does not belong to loneliness. Silence belongs to God. Think of Elijah on the mountain. He wasn't surrounded by people. He wasn't in the middle of applause or approval. He wasn't receiving affirmation or encouragement. He was exhausted, discouraged, and convinced he was completely alone. And God did not meet him in the wind or the earthquake or the fire. He met him in a whisper. A whisper is personal. A whisper is intimate. A whisper means God was closer to Elijah than the fear, the exhaustion, and the lie that he was utterly alone. That's how God speaks in your silence, not in dramatic explosions, but in gentle truth, not in loud declarations, but in steady reassurance. He steps into that quiet place where loneliness has tried to claim territory and whispers what no one else has spoken to your heart: I am here. I am with you. I have not left you. The world may be silent, but heaven is not. Some of you have been living in that kind of silence. The silence after someone walked out. The silence after a relationship broke. The silence after dreams crumbled. The silence after a season changed and left you feeling like you didn't know who you were anymore. And in that silence, loneliness has been preaching its sermon, telling you you have nothing, telling you you are forgotten, telling you your best days are behind you. But God is speaking a different message. If you would lean in a little closer, you would hear Him saying, This silence is not punishment, it is preparation. This quiet is not a sign of absence. It is an invitation to hear me more clearly. Sometimes God silences the world around you so he can strengthen the world within you. Sometimes he lets the noise fade because he has something to say that you can only hear in stillness. When loneliness shouts, it wants to overwhelm you. When God whispers, he wants to anchor you. And his whisper carries more power than loneliness ever will. His whisper can calm storms. His whisper can restore identity. His whisper can break chains. His whisper can tell you exactly who you are when everything else in your life feels uncertain. So when the silence feels heavy, don't run from it. Lean into it, because it might be the very moment God is preparing to speak the word that will heal your heart, lift your spirit, and remind you that his voice is stronger than your loneliness. And the reason his whisper matters so deeply is because it reminds you of something loneliness desperately doesn't want you to know. You are never truly alone because God walks into every room before you do. The silence may feel thick, the emptiness may feel overwhelming, but before your feet ever cross the threshold of a difficult place, God has already stepped inside, surveyed the landscape, prepared the strength you will need, and positioned the grace that will sustain you. You may walk into a hospital room with trembling hands, but he was standing there long before you arrived. You may walk into a meeting filled with uncertainty, but he was in that room before anyone else took their seat. You may walk into a season that feels foreign, frightening, or unfamiliar, but he has already mapped out every corner of it. Nothing surprises him. Nothing catches him off guard. Nothing arrives in your life without him already standing present, ready, and fully aware of what you will face. Loneliness tells you that you walk into places unaccompanied. God's truth tells you that you walk into places already covered. Think of the Israelites standing at the edge of the Red Sea. Before they ever got there, God had already planned the pathway through the waters. Before they felt trapped, he had already prepared deliverance. Before they cried out, he had already stationed an angel behind them and a pillar of cloud before them. They walked into what looked like an impossible situation, but God had entered that moment first. That is how he works with you. You step into the moment, he has already stepped into the miracle. You face the problem, he has already prepared the provision. You confront the loneliness, he has already positioned his presence around you like a shield. Some of you have walked into rooms recently where you felt invisible, unnoticed, or out of place. You sat at tables where no one understood your pain. You entered environments that felt cold and unwelcoming, and loneliness tried to convince you that you walked in there by yourself. But if you could see through spiritual eyes, you would realize you never walked in alone. God went before you, stood beside you, and hovered behind you. He is not waiting for you to arrive so he can show up. He arrives before you so you can have confidence when you get there. And here's the beauty of it. His presence doesn't just fill the spaces you walk into. His presence fills you. The reason you can walk into intimidating places with courage is not because the room is welcoming, but because the one who walked in before you is greater than anything inside it. Even when people leave, he stays. Even when support collapses, he holds you up. Even when life feels like a series of closed doors, he is the God who stands on the other side, preparing the exact door that will open at the right time. So when loneliness tries to wrap itself around your heart, reminding you of who isn't with you, speak this truth with boldness. My God goes before me. Say it when fear rises. Say it when doubt whispers. Say it when the silence feels suffocating, because you never walk into a room empty-handed. You walk in carrying the very presence of the one who entered before you, and that changes everything. And when you begin to grasp that he walks into every room before you do, something powerful begins to happen inside your spirit. You realize loneliness doesn't have to be your permanent identity, because purpose breaks loneliness every single time. Loneliness may whisper, you have nothing to offer, but purpose declares you were created for influence, for impact, for kingdom assignment. When God's presence goes before you, His purpose rises within you. See, loneliness tries to convince you that your life is small, that your influence is limited, that your voice doesn't matter. It makes you feel like you're standing on the sidelines, watching everyone else live out their calling while you are left behind. But purpose pulls you out of the shadows and into the reason God created you. Purpose reminds you that you were never designed to drift, you were designed to shine. Think of Moses tending sheep in the desert. He spent 40 years in obscurity, 40 years feeling forgotten, 40 years believing his best days were behind him. But the moment God called his name from the burning bush, loneliness lost its grip. Why? Because purpose reconnected him to destiny. Purpose reminded him of identity. Purpose replaced isolation with divine assignment. And that is what happens when God awakens your purpose. You begin to understand that your loneliness is not the end of your story. It is simply the hallway leading you to the door God is getting ready to open. You begin to see that your calling is too significant to be silenced by the enemy's lies. You begin to feel strength rising where emptiness used to live. Because when God calls you, He never calls you into nothingness. He calls you into meaningful work, meaningful relationships, meaningful impact. Some of you have been sitting in a season where you've questioned your value. Loneliness made you believe the lie that you are unnecessary, unseen, unneeded. But hear me, when God deposited purpose into your life, He did it with intention. He equipped you with gifts that no one else carries. He placed you in environments no one else can reach. He gave you experiences, some painful, some beautiful, that uniquely position you to serve others in ways you don't even realize yet. And here is the remarkable truth. The moment you start stepping into what God created you to do, the giant of loneliness begins to crumble. Why? Because purpose always brings partnership. Purpose attracts the right people. Purpose draws you into community. Purpose connects you with those running the same race. Loneliness thrives when you sit still. It suffocates when you start moving toward what God has called you to accomplish. Purpose gives you direction when life feels aimless. Purpose gives you courage when fear tries to silence you. Purpose turns your pain into ministry, your past into testimony, your emptiness into overflow. When you live with purpose, you stop asking, "Why am I alone?" and you start asking, "Lord, where are you sending me next?" Because the mission of God in your life is always bigger than the moments of isolation the enemy wants to trap you in. You weren't called to survive loneliness. You were called to rise above it. You weren't created to sit in the shadows. You were designed to step into your assignment with authority. And when you begin walking in purpose, you realize that every lonely season was preparing you, shaping you, sharpening you so that you could carry the weight of what God was getting ready to place in your hands. And once you understand that purpose breaks loneliness, something even deeper begins to unfold. You start to see that God has been using your loneliness all along to shape you, strengthen you, and ultimately send you. The seasons you wished you could skip, the nights you cried yourself to sleep, the moments when it felt like no one cared, those weren't signs that God abandoned you. Those were the very tools He was using to prepare you for the assignment ahead. Loneliness is uncomfortable, but it is never wasted. God does not waste pain. He does not waste silence, and He does not waste seasons that feel empty. In fact, some of the most powerful vessels God ever used were people He trained in the quiet places, in the hidden places, in the places where no applause echoed and no eyes were watching. Why? Because loneliness has a way of stripping away everything superficial until only the essential remains, your dependence on Him. Think of Joseph. Before he ever wore a robe of authority, he wore chains of loneliness. He was rejected by his brothers, isolated in a pit, forgotten in a prison. But every lonely step prepared him to stand strong in the palace. The loneliness didn't break him, it refined him. It stripped away pride, deepened compassion, sharpened discernment, and built a character strong enough to carry the weight of God's purpose. And maybe that's what God has been doing in you. Your loneliness is not punishment, it is preparation. It's God shaping your heart, so that when he elevates you, your character won't collapse under the weight of blessing. It's God strengthening your faith so that when he sends you, you will walk with confidence instead of fear. It's God training you to hear his voice so clearly that the noise of the world won't distract you when he launches you into greater responsibility. Some of the greatest revelations in your life will come from the quietest, loneliest seasons, because it is in those moments that God becomes more real than the people who left you, more faithful than the opportunities that disappeared, more present than the support that failed you. Loneliness teaches you who God is, and once you know him in that depth, the world cannot shake you. And then comes the moment when God doesn't just shape you in loneliness, he sends you out of it. The loneliness that once made you weak becomes the testimony that makes you strong. The isolation that once felt suffocating becomes the very platform he uses to help others who are walking through the same valley. God turns lonely people into powerful leaders, compassionate encouragers, and bold warriors. You start to see that your tears watered the ground of empathy, your silence sharpened the clarity of your calling, and your solitude became a sanctuary where God forged your identity. And when he sends you, you don't go out timid, you go out anchored. You go out knowing that the God who met you in the most hidden places will stand with you in the most public moments. So instead of resenting the lonely seasons, you begin to recognize them as the holy ground where God shaped your soul. You begin to thank him for the nights he held you together. You begin to realize that loneliness wasn't the end of your story. It was the birthplace of your strength. And now, strengthened, shaped, refined, prepared, you are ready for where he is sending you next.